Welcome to I'll Have You Know, a podcast from Rice Business. This episode is part of our Up Next series, where faculty, researchers, and alumni weigh in on the trends currently shaping the world of business.
Hello, everyone. So thrilled to have you here. Welcome to I'll Have You Know, a podcast from Rice Business. I'm your host, Maya Pomroy, and a proud alum from the class of 2022. Today, I'm honored to speak with someone who has truly shaped and defined Rice Business, not just inside the classroom, but beyond for the past 2.5 decades. James Weston is the Senior Associate Dean for Degree Programs and the Harmon Whittington Professor of Finance. Since joining the faculty in 2000, James has dedicated his career to empowering students, to helping guide them through the complexities of corporate finance, and guiding and inspiring them to make meaningful contributions to our world. His impact is undeniable. He is a 3-time recipient of the prestigious Alumni Faculty Award. That's a hard award to win. There's a lot of competition, so winning it 3 times is a big deal. His research spans critical topics, including banking, stock market liquidity, and risk management, also very timely today. He's published in numerous academic journals, been cited in congressional testimony, and is a legend in the world of finance. James's research addresses real-world complexities. His most recent work with fellow Rice Business professor Alex Butler and University of Wisconsin professor Eric Mayer uncovered racial bias and disparities in auto loan pricing for minority borrowers, which we will also discuss this evening. We will discuss James's remarkable journey, including his entrepreneurial experience. I'm not sure how many of you know, but James owned a bar in Rice Village, which, I can't wait to talk about that. That sounds like a fun experience. We'll also talk about his research and his vision for the future of Rice Business. So before we begin, we'd like to ask everyone to please silence your cell phones and devices. And also let you know that at the end of our conversation, we're going to have a question and answer session. So please have your questions ready. We're very much looking forward to hearing from you. And following the conclusion of our recording, we're going to have a reception, and we're inviting all of you to join us. So without further ado, let's welcome Professor James Weston.
Thank you very much, Maya. Thanks, everybody, for coming. This is my first podcast, so I'm very excited.
Mine too.
So it's not true.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here, and I've very much been looking forward to talking with you because 25 years is quite remarkable to be in one educational institution.
I can't believe it. Yeah, I can't believe it every time I hear it. 25 years I've been here. This was my first job out of my PhD program. I got my PhD in economics at the University of Virginia. And typically, economists go to economics departments and PhD business students go to business schools. So it's a little bit of an arbitrage for an economist to go to a business school because it's about a 30% more pay. And typically economists are a little too nerdy to teach in business schools. They don't always talk in full sentences. But I had written a paper as part of my dissertation on modeling competition between NASDAQ dealers. And so the industrial organization application in my dissertation was very much a finance topic. And I had gotten that paper published in the Journal of Finance, which is what business schools are looking for. So I was able to make the jump and get the pay bump.
I want to sort of back up. So when you were young, is finance and economics something that you always aspired to study? Because like I said, I wanted to be an astronaut. And did you always want to be an economist?
No, I wanted to be a chemical engineer.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had gone to college under the honors science program to do my chemistry major and do chemical engineering. And I found myself freshman year in the lab late at night, poring over data and thinking this is insanely boring. I hate this. And I had absolutely fallen in love with my micro theory class. And I told my dad that like I don't want to just look at data all day. I want to study real world questions, and I wanted to become a social scientist. And now I look at data all day.
Well, you do other things too.
I do.
You do other things too. So what were some pivotal moments that you have had? So you made that pivot, right, and into the world of finance, and tell me about your early years of what was that like for you?
It was working all the time, weekends and nights to make tenure. When I first got here, I was working. Making tenure at a tier 1 research university is very, very difficult.
Sure.
And as hard as I work, I attribute an enormous amount of my success to dumb luck. Dumb luck in coming here. Dumb luck in meeting Gustavo Grion and Alex Butler, who were my lifelong sort of friends and co-authors and research collaborators. And those are very hard relationships to find and form. And we just got lucky. It's like a little bit like mining for gold. You dig, and you pan. And a lot of times you just go home poor. But we dug, and we panned.
And you didn't go home poor?
And we found a nice vein. And we were able to mine that into a series of publications that led to a tenurable record. But I really do credit a huge amount of luck in that.
I think a lot of people do. I think that, luck is part of what makes people successful, and you have to be at the right place at the right time with the right people, and all of those different variables matter.
Yeah, I consider myself extraordinarily lucky. Yeah.
So tell me about your background, because you did spend some time at the Federal Reserve along with someone else that we know, Dean Rodriguez.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, after college, I interviewed. I really wanted a job in investment banking. And so I interviewed with all the top banks on Wall Street. I'd done really well, make good grades, and I could put on a suit and talk to bankers. But I didn't get any offers, even though I had the late round interviews with all the major Wall Street banks. I didn't get any offers. And then the Fed made me an offer. And the guy who called me, Dave Barker, who was pivotal in my sort of career, was a Chicago PhD economist. And I said, yeah, I was kind of disappointed I didn't get any bank offers. And he's like, you're not a banker. They knew once they got to know you that like you don't want to do deals, you want to study stuff, and like that you belong at the Fed. And so I wound up in the right place. The labor market's pretty efficient sometimes. It knew better than I did. It knew better than I did where I belonged.
Did you have some mentors that you could share with us that really helped guide you to where you are today?
Yeah, in high school, my sophomore year, my chemistry professor, Mr. Clancy, told me to stop smoking weed and cutting class and put my nose to the grindstone. And I didn't belong hanging out in the back of the high school. I belonged in the lab. And he really read the riot act to me and made me join the Science Olympiad. And he called my parents at home and convinced them to make me join the Science Olympiad, which I was very angry at Mr. Clancy for doing that. So I joined the Science Olympiad, and I was like, this is the dorkiest, dumbest, worst thing that's ever happened in my entire life, and I hate everyone. And I had just an absolute blast hanging out with the nerds. And I realized very quickly that I belong here much better. Like this is a much better fit for me, hanging out with the nerds.
You need to let Mr. Clancy know.
I did. I wrote him a letter.
Okay, yep. as long as he knows. So your time here, you've won multiple awards, and like I mentioned, those are very competitive awards. To win 3 times is a really big deal. So what is it that you think in the way that you teach really resonates with students? Because you really are.
It's really hard. It's really hard for me to answer that. In fact, I sort of can't answer it. And I believe this in my heart so deeply. I have never met the person that teaches my class.
Wow.
That's some other person. That persona takes over when the lights go on. And I don't know who that is.
Wow.
I don't know that I like them.
Well, your students do.
They're successful. Yeah.
Your students absolutely.
I'm really mostly serious in that. Like, I don't know that personality. It's a personality that jumps out onto the stage like a performer when they play a role. Or if you ask somebody who who plays Othello, are you really Othello in real life? They're like, no, that was a play, dude. Like that was me acting a script. Like that's what I feel like when I watch videos of myself teaching. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know who that person is.
So over the 25 years of your teaching here, can you tell me some stories about some students that stand out to you that have gone on to do amazing things and have come back?
Oh my gosh, that could take up the whole night.
Okay,
Like
right.
I have like some of my alumni are here. Christine and Kevin and people and Mark Rudkin, like a whole bunch of my alums that I have become incredibly good. I'm godfather to like 3 different alumni's kids.
Wow.
Yeah, like because I really, really enjoy my students and I really enjoy getting to know them and forming relationships with them and hanging out with them. It's the dividend from teaching adults. When you teach undergrads, you can't go grab a beer or you shouldn't go grab a beer with them after class. But with grown-ups, you can. And when I started here, I was 30. I was younger than some of my students, and so they would always joke and try to card me at the bar,
But
yeah, but it led to and a whole number of business ventures. I've owned real estate with some of my alums. I'm in a business right now with one of my alums and Snoop Dogg.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah. One of my alums from maybe a decade ago, Richard Gout, is into pressing rare vinyls. And he needed a little bit of factoring bridge financing, and so he put together a group of his friends to give him financing, and to go and pitch to Snoop to get the IP for Death Row Records, some of their really, really old releases that aren't in vinyl, and he wants to put the vinyl on them and sell them to collectors for a very high price. And so it's a cool little business that I'm now a part of with Snoop.
So when are you expecting your ROI?
The payback on that is about 90 days because it's just rolling credit at about a 15% IRR. How could I say no?
Well, my next question is, are you looking for additional investors?
Not at this time.
That's a bummer, but when you are, you'll let us know.
But I love doing stuff like that. I love scrapping around with alumni that have interesting ideas.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's so many fascinating people that have come out of Rice Business and that continue to. So that's one of the beautiful things about this program, and it is one of the top 5 finance programs in the country. Yeah. So why do you think that is? There's so many amazing schools, but Rice really does stand out. It's considered one of the new Ivies. And what do you think has transformed in the past 25 years?
Well, what I saw when I came down here 25 years ago was the 4th largest city in the U.S. without a top business school and the 2nd largest Fortune 500 headquarters location in the country. And how could it not have a top business school with such an incredible demand for secondary education and an MBA degree? It seemed like if we didn't execute to becoming a really good business school, that we had screwed it up. I mean, that was Rice's fault because really all the macro, all the edifice was there. We just needed to execute. And so getting the right people in place, building the right administration, building the right faculty and the right curriculum. It was almost too easy. It was like ripe fruit laying on the ground. From my perspective, 25 years ago, I was like, this is a school that is just perched to take off. How could it not? Unless we just really screw it up.
Well, I don't think you screwed it up.
On wood.
Yeah, not knock on wood for sure. So going on to the research that you did with Professor Butler, most recently, that was fascinating in terms of auto loan, the lending and the price differentials for minorities and in comparison to non-minorities. Could you go into that research? And first of all, what made you interested in auto loans to begin with?
Yeah, so I had watched many years ago a reality show called King of Cars. I don't know if anyone ever saw the show, but it's one of these like pawn wars or like, the pawn store people or the storage wars where they bid, like one of those types of shows. And they were following people around car dealerships. And I had gone to once I watched one and watched the consumer sort of in the financing office negotiating with the auto loan officer. I was fascinated. And so I had kind of like, I had put it on my cork board that, like, think about this down the road. And then in conversations with Alex and Eric, we had started talking about studying auto loans, and I was fascinated because I had downloaded both seasons of King of Cars and just fast forwarded through to like the finance dealership negotiations because it was super interesting. And all these consumers kept saying like, hey, you got to get me into this car. And they're like, I can't get you this car. You got to, and they wouldn't haggle over the price of the car. They were haggling over, you got to get me to $400 a month.
Right.
And then the finance officer is like, I can't do $400 a month. And then there's, wow, I could do this, I could do that. And then the consumer would walk out of the dealership finance office with like, I got $400 a month. It's like, yeah, but you're paying 15% for the next 40 years. Like, this is the worst loan I've ever seen anyone get for a car. But you got the car, and they got them for $400 a month.
Yep.
And it made me think that the purchaser of the car was not a very financially sophisticated person dealing with a finance officer who was a very financially sophisticated person. And that was an opportunity for a lot of subjective decision-making on the part of the dealership's finance officer. And that means when no one is watching, there's a lot of opportunity for bad behavior. And there is no one watching. When you apply for a mortgage, every spotlight of the regulatory system is looking at you. Every single thing about your mortgage application is reported to the Fed and scrutinized heavily. When you walk into a dealership's finance office, the lights are off and no one is watching what happens in that room. It is seedy.
Very seedy.
Yeah. And so when we got into this paper, really no one in social science had written very much on auto lending or its consequences or the discrimination aspect that we were studying. And it's because there was no data, because there's no regulation, because there's no reporting requirements. There really is no data availability.
Why? I'm just curious as to why there is another, aspects of loaning, but not cars.
Right, your congressman. So the answer to why there's so much data and transparency in mortgage lending is the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act that was passed in the late 1980s, and the data collection started in the early 90s.
And what prompted that?
Widespread evidence of housing discrimination that was anecdotal, and constituents coming to their congressman, people complaining to the Consumer Reporting Board, people complaining to the Better Business Bureau, but it was anecdotal and haphazard. And once the data was collected, there was widespread evidence of discrimination in mortgage lending. But once that evidence was presented, that discrimination started to attenuate. Like anything, when you put the bright sunlight of transparency on something, people's behavior and incentive change. So the reporting structure then changed people's behavior because they knew they were going to be observed if they were making. And when I was at the Fed was when the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act was passed. And I was one of the first economists to run those studies of discrimination in the mortgage market when I was in banking studies at the New York Fed.
So maybe that's one of the reasons that you...
Oh, absolutely. I had a lot of familiarity with the issue. Yeah. When I was at the Fed, we could identify loan officers in the data set. And we could say, there it was, you could say like, that loan officer never approves a mortgage to a minority.
That's a bad apple.
That's a bad apple. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's elaborate more on these car loans. So give me an example of the difference between a minority auto loan price.
Yeah. So the way we got to this research question was we had a great database from Experian on everyone's financial histories. We had millions and millions of consumers and every single thing about them. And then over in the home mortgage disclosure data, we had every mortgage application. In the Experian data, we didn't have anything about their demographics. So we didn't know man or woman. We didn't know their race. We didn't know anything about them except the zip code where they applied for the mortgage and how much they were borrowing. In the home mortgage disclosure data, we have the full application. So we know the gender, we know the race, we know everything about them, education, age, everything.
Because you have to, right?
Yeah. Right? And so then the question was, how do we juxtapose those two data sets in a way that we can sort of link the two? And we link them by the house. So in the mortgage application, we know the zip code, we know the month that they applied for the mortgage and how much they were borrowing. And then over in the Experian data, we had whether or not they had a mortgage, when the mortgage was originated, the zip code that the mortgage was where they lived, and we knew the amount of the house principal. So then the question became, how many in 77005 zip code in March of 2025, how many housing transactions went off at $437,000. And we were wondering, like, how many are we going to get when we try and juxtapose these two data sets? And the answer was we got almost all unique matches. Because houses go off at odd intervals, we were able to get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of unique matches. So then we had all, from the Experian data, everything about their car loans linked to their demographic information from their mortgage application. And we were able to dig in and study whether or not people, when they applied for an auto loan, people were rejected more on the basis of their race. Conditional on, and we found widespread evidence of discrimination.
Okay.
So you would have to have, if you applied for a loan as a Black or Hispanic borrower, you would need an additional 50 points on your credit score to have the same probability of acceptance as a white borrower. That's a huge difference. You could fill the Super Bowl. You could fill the Super Bowl stadium every year with minorities denied having the same credit quality as a similar white borrower. If they were accepted, if they got the mortgage, if they got the car loan, they paid about 75 basis points more on their auto loan than a white borrower with the same credit characteristics. Now, you could say, as people sometimes do, that this is evidence of not discrimination, but statistical discrimination, which is a fancy way for economists to say, like, oh, it's not evil in the hearts of men. It's just that, minorities are not as good credit quality on some other dimension that you don't observe. And so race is sort of proxying for these other softer credit quality issues that the loan officer knows about, but you as the econometrician can't see. So it's an explanation that we didn't think was true, but we all have thinks and thoughts, but that's not what goes into a scientific paper. With the Experian data, what we're able to do, which no other researchers were able to do, is study the future performance of that borrower. Because if it was statistical discrimination and they really were worse in credit quality on some unobserved dimension, the loan should perform worse. You should see more delinquencies. We see fewer delinquencies. So the outcome test, which is what we call it in economics, to really put the nail in the coffin on discrimination, sailed through for us. So then we were able to say, lower approvals, higher interest rates, but the loan actually performs better. That's clear smoking gun evidence of discrimination. So that's why we got the paper published in our very top journal in finance as the lead article in the editor's choice, because it was really the first really hard evidence of discrimination in auto lending and social science.
So now that you have this evidence,
what
happened?
Hopefully, there was some movement in the Senate Banking Committee to improve disclosure for auto lending. There was a bill that made it not out of committee, but was being circulated and getting ready. My sense is that is going to happen. We're going to have to be a little patient on that. I don't think there's a big move towards increase. I mean, this is a relatively light regulation because it's not. It really all it is a reporting regulation, which is a relatively low regulatory burden in the grand scheme of things. But my hope is that the Senate Banking Committee continues to take action on it, and we see something similar to the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, where auto dealers just have to report. They have a spreadsheet, and you just have to send it to the Fed, the way every bank does with every mortgage application. And hopefully that transparency attenuates the discrimination the way it largely did in home mortgages.
But it took time.
Yeah, that took time. Yeah, it took time. It was a 10-year process to get the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act passed. It'll probably take that long on auto lending. And we're not the only voice in this choir. There's lots of other people now that are sort of jumping on the bandwagon.
Right. Let's switch gears a little bit. So to something, more fun. Let's talk about you're owning a bar in Rice Village. Yeah. Because, after listening to that, I kind of want to drink. It's a little challenging to listen to that. So what made you decide that you want to open a bar?
I got it at a fire sale price. That really I didn't wake up in the morning wanting to own a bar. But my friend Hans had owned Hans's Beer House over in the village. Maybe some of you guys remember that place, but he got out of that very quickly. And the Kelvin Arms was open for an operator because they had just closed. The previous operator had embezzled money and left the country. And so the landlord, the landlord was looking for a new operator, and Hans came in, and needed a little bit. He didn't have two nickels to rub together, so he was raising some money from some friends, and so I bought a minority stake in the bar from Hans. And one thing leads to another, and Hans had decided that he wanted to open a Viking restaurant across town. And I'm going to say that again. Hans had decided that he wanted to open a Viking restaurant across town. And I want you to picture what a Viking restaurant looks like. And I want you to picture, you think of how many people on an average night would go to the Viking restaurant. And whatever number you're thinking is way too high. So what do you do when your Viking restaurant is about to go belly up, but you know that next month everybody's going to start coming to the Viking restaurant? You go and you get a payday loan.
Ah,
yeah.
I remember those.
Yeah. From Eagle First Financial Corp in Brooklyn.
Sounds legit.
That's totally legit. And what do you do when that loan comes due, but your Viking bar hasn't turned around, but you know it will next month?
Always next month.
Yeah, you go and you get another one
Right.
for twice as big.
Right.
And then you do it a third time. And then you come to your partners at the Kelvin and you say, hey, guys, I got bad news for you. I owe $250,000 to Eagle First Financial Corp. And I probably should have told you this, but I didn't tell you this, but I put it on your bar. Which was a sad story.
Well,
a sad story. But I had already seen kibitzing from the bartenders and cases of whiskey leaving out the back door. So I had kind of known that things were going south at the Viking restaurant. So I had already talked to the landlord at our bar and said, hey, Mr. Wilson, if things ever go south, don't put a lock on the door. Just here's my cell phone. Call me. And he's like, whoa, what do you know? What's going on? And I'm like, nothing. Just if anything ever goes wrong, just call me. So sure enough, he calls me and he's like, Hans is 90 days past due on rent and I'm putting a lock on the door. And so I went over with one of my other partners, Timmy the lawyer, and
it's good. It's always good to have one of those.
Have Timmy the lawyer. You got to have Timmy the lawyer. And so Timmy the lawyer says, well, here's what we'll do. He's like, according to the lease agreement, you can seize property, plant, and equipment for non-payment. So why don't you just seize all the bar stools and all the whiskey on the shelf? And
what's left?
Yeah, what's left? Because there was no assets at the bar. It's just the lease. The lease is the asset. So we seized everything, and we wrote up a new lease that day. And that was how I became majority owner of the Kelvin Highlander. That's when we changed the name from the Kelvin Arms to the Kelvin Highlander. It's not fraudulent.
It's rebranding.
It's not fraudulent transfer. So you rebrand it and recapitalize the firm. And so then when Hans sat down and told us that he had put all this debt, on our bar and he had bankrupted us, I was like, yeah, that's a sad story. But I have an even sadder story for you, which is that this is no longer your bar.
Congratulations.
Timmy and I signed a lease. And then we pulled over an operator from one of the other bars across town, and she came and ran it for us for a few years. And then when COVID, so we owned and operated it for about 5 years.
Wow.
And it was an interesting thing to do. It was fun. It's good to get your hands dirty, being a small business owner. But the bar business is very dirty. It really is not like the TV show Cheers.
No,
it really isn't. It really isn't. It's a very dirty business.
How?
Just tons of, bartenders aren't always the most reliable, trustworthy people in the economy. And the beer suppliers aren't either. And bars attract,
a certain personality.
Yeah. A lot of very sick people. And that's bad news. When someone is waiting at the door, someone's rail thin and waiting at your door at 3 p.m. to get the 3 whiskeys they need to make it to 4 p.m., it doesn't make me feel good about what I'm doing for a living because I'm a drug dealer.
Yeah, it wouldn't make me feel very good about myself either.
So and lots of drug use too in the bathrooms. And I can't have people selling coke out of my bathroom when my name is on a liquor license. That's no bueno.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I say the bar business is a little bit dirty. That's what I mean. It's not like Cheers. Well, at least in my experience, it wasn't like Cheers. So when COVID happened, I was kind of happy to get rid of it. We had a nice force majeure in the lease, so we were able to put back the lease.
So that was how long you owned it until COVID?
I owned it until COVID. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So point to everyone: do not own a bar. Maybe maybe.
I mean, in a sense, I got the bar for free.
Well,
so like I didn't pay anything for it. I just took the lease. And we made some money at it, but like, I was joked that like in the 5 years of owning that bar, I make more I made of all the money I made in 5 years of owning that bar, I make more money in 2 days of executive education. So like it was never really part of my retirement plan.
Not cost.
Sorry, Jeffin.
So, being here at Rice and having all of these diverse experiences, my next question is, so what are you planning on doing next? I know that you have a new role here at Rice Business. Congratulations. Can you tell me about this new position of being the Senior Associate Dean for Degree Programs and what you hope to move forward here in the business school?
Yeah. So moving into administration means, in my mind at least, it means I'm not working anymore. I'm in the sense that I'm not executing the primary missions of the school, which are teaching and scholarship, and so I'm not teaching as much anymore, and I'm not doing as much scholarship anymore. Which means I'd better be doing something to collect the paycheck. And the way I genuinely view it is that I'm now trying to enable the rest of my faculty to do better teaching and better scholarship. My role is as a service leader, which is how I view this job, as a tour of service, not a career pivot. I didn't take this job to then become dean someplace, to then become provost someplace, to then become supreme commander of university somewhere. But like it was someone else's turn to do this very important role, which is to coordinate all the programs, get the teaching schedules done, make sure I'm protecting junior faculty and their teaching loads, make sure I'm putting the right people into the right classes, making sure we're keeping track of being fiscally responsible about course offerings, making sure that we're sort of mapping out the curriculum and smoothing things out for people the way they need it smoothed out. There's a lot of moving parts. And so one of the exciting things about taking over the job right now is launching the Verani Undergraduate Business School, which is extremely exciting because that business school has the opportunity, I think, to be a top 10 business school in the U.S. from the ground up at startup. Because if you look at the people we compete with, in science and engineering, it's Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Yale, Chicago, Northwestern. Most of those top schools don't have an undergraduate business school. And so that gives us a lot more latitude because Rice as a university is a top-notch place. I think once the rankings in a couple of years come out, I would be surprised if Rice wasn't the top 10 undergraduate business school.
I have no doubt that the Verani School will be one of the top schools.
Yeah, I was strongly in favor of getting undergraduate business school at Rice.
Well, it worked?
Yeah, it worked. So was the board. I mean,
Yeah, but it is. It's the expansion that Rice is going through right now is incredible to watch, and it is exciting. And I think that the more people know that there is an undergraduate, it's marketing now, right? It's all the role of marketing and making sure that people know.
There's going to be a fire hose of undergraduate students into our school. That I'm sure of. I think we have forecasts. They're aggressive for how many students we're going to be getting, and I think they're all going to be on the low end, because I think once that cycle starts of our undergraduates getting jobs, and then their peers seeing the jobs that they get with an undergraduate business degree, pulls in more people, and once people see that pulls in an increased number of applications who wouldn't have considered Rice, but now that we have the business school, I think it changes the applicant pool in a way that I really think our high-end forecasts will wind up on the low end.
So final question. Looking back at your very diverse career, so from academia to running a bar to everything in between, what overarching lesson or philosophy has guided you? I know this is a big, deep question. And how do you hope to leave your mark on business education?
Oh, wow.
You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know. In scholarship, I think of myself, I don't sort of have, my scholarship is all over the place. It's a shotgun of papers that I find interesting. Every paper I work on is on a new topic in a new area almost. And Rice has been generous with me in allowing me to sort of have other people. It's a bad career advice for an academic. You're supposed to become the person that studies Canadian share repurchases. And that's your whole career, is that one topic. It's how you get known in a field. And I've been scattershot, and as long as I've been successful, they've been supportive of me. But I sort of view the thing that ties together all my papers is as a foundational social scientist trying to measure things that are hard to measure. And so when I see things that I think have a lot of social import, or a research question that I think is really has either a practical application or some large social question that I think needs answering, the fun for me is trying to figure out how to measure it and trying to come up with a clever way of identifying the research question in a way that's unambiguous and in a way that we can solidify and say, like, that's the answer, and I know it with as near scientific certainty as I can, the existence of the Higgs boson particle.
We can't get into that right now, but
I'm saying, like, to treat it like a scientist.
Yes.
And study it like it's a real causal question.
Yeah.
And you attack it with the scientific method, and you attack it with the scrutiny and the scientific rigor that they use across campus.
Which is circling back to the very beginnings of why you wanted to pursue this as a career.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you wanted to do the research and the data, and you wanted to see the proof.
Yes. Yeah. Still a scientist in my heart. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, just a social scientist. Yeah.
Well, it has been really a joy and an honor to speak with you, James, and thank you all so much for being here with us this evening. We can continue the conversation at our reception, and I just want to do a plug for I'll Have You Know. You can listen to all of our podcasts wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So please listen and like and share, because I think that what we're doing here is pretty awesome and pretty unique and pretty special.
Thank you so much for hosting this. I really had fun.
No, I did too. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. This has been I'll Have You Know, a production of Rice Business. You can find more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'd love to hear what you think. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Maya Pomroy, and Brian Jackson.